Okay, so let's see our Java in action. We're gonna load and we're gonna run through some Android projects, which is why all of you guys are learning Java to begin with. So this is your work being paid off. So I'm gonna start out with an easy example just to get everybody back in the swing of thinking Android instead of Swing and instead of Java. And briefly remind everybody about how projects are created, blah, blah, blah. Then we'll go into a better one. So this is a short one, just to get our feet wet. And then also troubleshoot any problems you might have. And then we're getting into a better one that's going to look at abstract classes, interface classes, inheritance, and all sorts of different concepts. Because this is a Java programming class, as I'm going through the tutorials, I'm going to actually focus more on the Java programming parts, not necessarily explaining all the Android stuff. In the Android stuff, I focus mostly on the Android part and not explaining any of the Java stuff, so it's the exact opposite in terms of the perspective. This one's called optionsmenu.pdf. This is the PDF file, and it's this one right here. You got two choices. You can look at the tutorial and run through it with me, or you can download this solution and open up the solution. If you're going to download the solution, it's an easy way to get it in, just the same way we've been doing with non-Android projects. You can get it in same way by importing the project into the Eclipse IDE. Otherwise, if you want, you probably have better learning experience by going through the tutorial. So let's go ahead and create a new Android project, and we're going to create one that's going to inherit from activity. So it's going to be an activity project. So go ahead and open up Eclipse if it's not open already. Why did I close mine? I don't know. It's opening up now. I had it open. Should have just left it open. Oh, there we go. It's running a bit slow right now for some reason. Okay, it's okay. It's loading up. I closed all my other projects just to leave them alone. I'll still leave them in there, but I'm going File, New. Before we've been doing Java project, or if you just do project, you don't get any. So go down to Other, and from Other, select Android Application Project, and then click on Next. And I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to call it First One. You can call it anything you want. I already have one called what it's supposed to be called. So I believe the assignments, the PDF is going to have you call it something like Action Bar. So you can call it Action Bar. I am going to change the package name to EDU-ITU. So just in case I cut and paste out of here, I don't have to worry about the path. So I will change this one to EDU-ITU. Does not matter what you call it, actually. Alright, now that I've got this opened up, I'm going to select on Next. And I'm going to use an activity. We're going to see we're extending from activity, so we're inheriting from activity. And activity's got a few methods that we have to implement when we make an activity class. So I'm just going to go ahead and skip through this because this isn't really an Android class. So we're not worried about icons and stuff. But we're going to give our activity a couple of different options. In our extension library, we can extend and we can use a new blank activity. This is just going to basically format our XML file for us automatically. Just leave it on blank because we're going to add some stuff to it. I'm not even quite sure what we're going to do in this options menu, but here we're going to use we're not going to use any of the other ones, so just go ahead and click on Next. Name the main class main activity, which is going to be our main driver program, and our layout is going to be activity main, so go ahead and click on Finish. You might notice this new directory structure is created for you if you're in the Android class. This is the same thing we did last time. But last time I didn't really talk about the Java programming part of it, I just talked about the Android part of it. So, if you're not in the Android class, you can look at the videos from last weekend, actually, and learn all there is about Android and tons more stuff, focusing on the UI component. So the first thing it does, actually, and I'm going to briefly go through this just for the new people who have never heard of Android before. What you're looking at is the activity_main.xml file, which is going to be your main GUI interface, so it does not use Swing. But a lot of the names of a lot of the components or the widgets are pretty similar. So you'll see if you want to experiment with it on your own, or actually we'll be doing something in the next tutorial, it's very much a drag-drop situation where I dragged a button over and I drag the label over. And we have the same concept with the layouts. The default project is actually using what's called a relative layout. You can see it up here in the GUI. We have a text view, a button, but it's not going to say J button on it. So if I click on the XML screen, I see now instead of writing the code in Java for the swing classes, we have XML. And there's XML editors out there that will allow you to create these XML files and import them into your Java project. Or you can use this editor, which is okay for most things, to actually create your GUI interface. This code here does get converted to Java, however. Yes? Once you open up the project, by default this comes up for you. If it does not come up for you, go ahead down to the resource folder and click on layout, and you'll see mainActivity.xml show up. Let me zoom in for you so you can see what I'm looking at down here. Resource on the left hand side in the Project Explorer. Layout, and then you'll see activity main.xml. In the Android platform, all of the GUI components are in XML. The menus are in XML, the strings are in XML. However, the XML gets converted to Java for you automatically. The Java shows up in what's called a resource file that turns into an automated, so if you come up here where it says GEN for generated Java files, you see up here in the package we have r.java. If you click on r.java, in a few minutes it'll come up. You never want to edit this file because this file is created for you automatically. But the reason why I'm bringing this up is to show you the Java part of this. We have a class called R. R stands for resource. Believe it or not, the system is actually kind of interesting. It takes this entire resource folder, all XML code, parses all of this XML code, which is text readable, using a buffered reader actually, and then it creates and automatically generates r.java that gets compiled into r.java class that gets used in everything else. So you don't have to write the Java source code for the R file. So there's a lot of people that go in and start editing this. The only problem if you edit this thing is that the next time you go run the program, it's going to replace itself. The edits won't change because it's automatically created every time you run it by the contents of the XML file. But you might notice the format of this. So we have public final. Final means it's final, it doesn't change. Nothing in this file changes, it's all static. It's not dynamically used or altered. Instead, we change it in the code. We make variables or data members that are equal to these things. So what we're doing now is taking a look at this class R, and then in class R we have everything in, this is going to be final static. Final static I went over actually the first weekend of the course. It just basically means final and it's final. It's constant. Static is a class level, which means we never make an instance of r.java, which means you never import r.java. You never use r.java at all. It's used by the system with all of the methods that are inside of activity that uses r.java. And I'm going to show you that in a few minutes. So a lot of times I look at people's code and I look at the top and it says import r.java. Well, Eclipse will actually import it for you if it can't find the right one, if you're in the wrong package. That's a mistake. Don't do that, because that means you've borrowed somebody else's code and now you're telling me that you have. Because at the top it's trying to take somebody else's package path and somebody else's code, and it thinks it needs, and it never compiles anyway because it doesn't have the XML files that's created for r.java to begin with, because it can't find it because you didn't copy the whole thing correctly. Anyway, so in here we have a drawable ID layout. Well, that's the layout. So main activity is going to be equal to this hexadecimal kind of, this number here that we're going to look at this and go, doesn't mean anything. Not supposed to mean anything. It's interpreted by the Java engine for this project. So that's how that's, so this you don't want to edit. We also have a style, and we're going to talk about styles today as well. And then we have a app-based theme, app theme, some general settings that are made in here. When we look at this, we see attributes, layouts, strings, this is coming from the string. So if I come down to the resource file and I look at this file we just looked at, this one's the one that's called activity main, which is activity main here for our layout. If we look in the menu directory, I see I have activity main in here too. So in the menu directory I have activity main. And then over here in the values directory I have string and styles. So for values, and then for strings, in the strings, if I open this up, I'm going to have app name, hello world, and menu settings. So I'm going to double click on strings and you'll see what this looks like. In the strings.xml I have app name, menu settings, and hello world. So you can see all of the contents of that directory are automatically converted to Java for you. So you don't actually have to program in Java for the UI for Android. It's all done for you automatically. So I'm going to close that file because we're never going to use it. And let's take a look at the instructions and see. I've loaded some stuff on the GUI. I'm probably going to regret that. Who knows, but we'll see. In following along, in this particular tutorial, just because we want to get our feet wet, we're going to add some stuff to the project and see how the file inheritance works. So we're going to select and we're going to add a menu.xml resource to the project, because the project here is going to use an options menu. So idea here is to see how the Java is working. So we're going to select from the project, we're going to right mouse click and select File, New, Other, Android XML file to create a new XML file resource. We're going to select menu as the resource type, and then we're going to enter in main menu as the file name, and then we're going to press the finish button. And I have a screenshot here that shows you what it's supposed to look like. So let me go back out into the Android directory. Stop me if I'm going too fast through this, by the way. Okay, so I'm going to go no, because I don't want to put my button and my label on the UI. So I close this completely, close this completely. Actually going to do a menu, so I'm just going to come up here and go File, New, Other. Now instead of creating an Android application project, I'm going to create an Android XML file, I believe. We have different XML files, so I want to make sure I'm going to select the right one. And I'm just going to select the Android XML file to create a new XML resource. And then I'm going to select menu as the resource type. So if I come back to the menu over here, I just want the Android XML file. If I do that, we're going to click on Next. And then down here, I believe, is where I'm, up here on the top, where it says Resource Type. See, these are, every one of the resources, as I mentioned before, is in an XML format. So we don't want a layout, I want a menu, so I'm going to go to Menu. So I'm selecting Menu here, and I'm going to give it a name, and I think I'm going to call it a main menu. It's a main menu. So enter main menu as the name. If I just look at the screenshot, don't put the XML extension on it. In fact, this is the case for all your items that you're adding in the XML interface. You're never putting XML on anything, which is kind of ironic because you're creating XML files. But it's always going to extend .xml onto everything. If I click on Finish, you're going to see that now in the menu directory, I have a new XML file, and this one's going to be called Main Menu. And you see I have two tabs on the bottom. One says Layout on it. The other one says Main Menu.xml. Every single one of the XML files has this option. So in the layouts, in the strings, everything. So the entire GUI is formatted in XML. The entire GUI has both a graphic and an editor, so you can edit XML instead of editing it with a graphic. If you're not familiar with XML, it's just like HTML. We have opening and closing tags. Except for HTML is to mock up the text. XML mocks up data. So it's actually not a bad interface. So let's see what we're going to do here. We're going to edit the menu, and we're going to add 2 items to the menu. So let's go ahead and edit the menu. The new menu item will be created in the resource menu folder, which I found just a few minutes ago. Open the file and select the Layout tab of the Android editor. Add the following code to create 2 menu items. You can actually cut and paste from here, or you can add the items yourself. I'm going to take the shortcut method and copy and paste from here. So I'm copying it. I'm going over to the XML file because I clicked on. If you do the layout, you can add them manually by pressing the add button and then filling in the items. Or you can click on the XML code. I'm just going to remove what's here and add the pasted code that I copied. And I'm going to say it's messed up. Wasn't there a menu option to format it? Somebody showed this to me. Control something F.
Control Shift F.
Control Shift F. So Control Shift F. No, it didn't work.
Right click source.
Alright, let's just do it this way. Source format. There we go. Alright, I have to write that down. Source format. So, yeah, you guys are teaching me all these new items here. I never use this stuff because I don't copy and paste that much unless I'm showing you an example. So here we go. So source format will automatically format it for you if your copying and pasting didn't work right. So what do? We added 2 items to the menu. These 2 items are going to be parsed into Java code and they're going to be shown up on our menu. So let's go back then and take a look to see what we're going to do next. So we're going to add the code to the main activity.java file to include the menu. So we're going to add the following source code to main activity.java. And we're going to take a look, and I'm going to actually go through the kind of the Java stuff so you can kind of see what we're looking at. In fact, I'm going to take the shortcut because I know about the source format, and I'm not going to copy the package that's sitting at the top because it has a different name. Actually, it would be a good idea. I can show you what the error message was, but we'll just continue. I'm going to take and copy this, and I'm going to stick it in my main menu. And then I want to talk about the Java code for a minute, because this is what we're here for. So I'm going to press save. I'm saving my main menu. I'm going back to my source code directory now. You see, in an Android project, we have many more directory structures than just the source code. So it's a little bit more detailed. But we see instead of main.java, we got mainActivity.java, where this is coming from. I didn't create any classes. I'm not making any instances of any classes, but I could if I wanted to, actually. In fact, I might just do this as an experiment. I think I still have the Java programming class for person, so I can add a person in here and show you something. And in fact, I'm going to play around with it a little bit just to give you an idea. So I'm just going to take what's in here out and replace it with this other code. And then I'm going to press source format. Uh-oh, we have more options. There it is. And except for down here, what happened here? Word wrap. T and O at the end. Oh, here's a toast right here, yes. That's the problem. And then down here, what is this break? We're missing the T here. Oh, the T was there. There was a space. Okay. Let's see what else we got here. We have another. We have break, but I need to put a semicolon. What's this default? Okay. Now let me source control it. Format. Ah, there we go. All right. If it's not working, you can also open up the solution, cut paste it from the solution. That might be another option for you. Okay, so what we want to do right now is compare Android with regular stuff and tell you that, to reinforce the point that it's all Java, which is why we're doing this. This is why you're learning Java, by the way, as well. So we have main activity. Main activity or main extends activity. It's inheritance. We're extending from activity. So if we take out one of these methods as an example, the main one is the onCreate. We're going to get the same message as we did before with inheritance. It's going to come back and say, well, here, let's just take this guy out too. We don't really need the override, but we should get something up here. Well, it's not going to update for me, but we should get something up here that says it's not implemented. So you're extending or inheriting from it, probably want to implement it. but the thing is, it's not an interface, so we're not required to implement it. But what we're going to try and do is override. So that's why the word override is actually here, because we're optionally taking the behavior of our activity. We're going to override it. We're going to override the method, and there's two methods that we generally override, which is why we have override in here. And the two methods that we're overriding is onCreate and onCreateOptionsMenu. So what we're looking at, how did I make an error here already? There we go. Because this is the extra one. And now I'm like, how in the world? There we go. It's because Eclipse tries to put stuff in for you and does put some stuff in for you automatically. I'm like, I just took out the comments. How did that happen? So remember overriding, overloading. Immediately what we're doing is we're taking, because we're extending from activity, activity's not going to do anything for us unless we overload. Excuse me, overwrite or override. So we're overriding two important methods here. We actually have three of them in here. We have on options items selected, and we created an options menu. The options menu that we created, we're using it with the main menu. So onCreate is the bundle that's going to run, it's the method that's going to run automatically. It's in activity, so every activity starts, there's a life cycle to the activity, about 5 different stages to it. OnCreate, OnResume, OnExit, on this, on that. That's where this one's coming from. We're taking the method and we're running super onCreate. This should look familiar. We're running super onCreate. We're saving the saved instance state that we're taking from the bundle. Most people say, what's the bundle? Well, that's the information that's being stored for the project. Each project that runs is running in its own separate Java program. It's everything inside of the Java program that we're getting, so we can stuff stuff in the bundle and pull it out when we need it while the program's running. But it's taking automatically from activity. This is the method we're overriding, which means this is exactly as implemented in activity. Activity knows how to do it. We're just going to take it and say onCreate, set the context view to something. So we're running a method called setContextView that's inside of activity that sets the context to r.layout.activityMain. Well, this is the R file. Everything was static final in there, which means we're running it from R. Static means it's a class, not an instance variable. We never make an instance of R. Instead, we go R at the class level. R.layout, and inside I showed you had R.layout, R.menu, R.everything in there. So this one's R.layout.activityMain, which means use that one. So this is how we change the activity. If we created a new activity for the, if we created a new XML file for the user interface, just change the name of this file and all of a sudden you changed it. This is new for the template, but we changed it on this one. The old Android template never used to have the options menu in it. Then someone decided, oh, let's just put the options menu in there too, because everyone puts an options menu in there. Okay. OnCreate options menu, we're going to see that when this project runs in a few minutes, what it does. It's taking the menu we just created, and it's menu. So it's taking this is like string S. It's taking a menu, and the menu that it's taking is called menu. And we're going to use a menu inflator. So it's a menu inflator, which is a new object. So here's what you get in Android. Just like you get in the string classes, just like you get in the I/O and all of the other things we've looked at. Collections is another example. It's just another package. It's these packages here. It's from Android. So we have Android app activity, which is what giving us this activity. Not stored in the local package, it's stored elsewhere. We have OS bundle, which is going to be for the operating system bundle. The views, and then the widget toast that we're going to use because we're going to send up a toast message. So inflator is going to get the menu inflator, going to create a new inflator object that's going to inflate the menu. Basically, it's the opposite of deflate. Now it's going to take and disperse out all of the items that are in the XML file and create menu items out of it. So inflator.inflate, well, it's inflating r.menu.main menu, and it's turning it into a menu, and then it's going to return true. So it's a Boolean message, a Boolean method. It returns true if it inflated the menu. What runs this? It runs automatically from activity. When activity starts up, it automatically runs the onCreate. We never have to tell it to create it. So we don't have a main program in here. Instead, we're using the automatic activity. So we don't have to extend from activity. But in this case, we are extending activity. In the Android class, we extend almost everything. So let's see. What are we doing down here? What we've done before, actually. We're switching the item get item ID. And this is going to be the item that we've actually clicked on. And so we have the case in which the item r.id.menu item 1 or menu item 2. And for those of you who are not in the Android class, toast is, why they call it toast? Not quite sure, but it sends up a little pop-up menu. I'd call it notice, menu, pop-up or something. Message, actually message sounds good. So maybe there's a mystery. Maybe someone knows why they call it toast. I don't know, but toast.makeText this for this application, for this object. Menu 1, item 1 was selected, toast with a short length or with a long length, but we're going to use short length here. .show, show it. Very similar to swing, actually. The syntax is very similar, but we're not using swing. We're using Java through an XML creator, and we're using this Android interface to the r.everything instead of swing. So it's yet a different platform, different way of doing it. Bunch of case switches, and then it returns. That's the meat of the entire program. So I have a VBox emulator that I'll run this in. So I'm going to load up my emulator. If you're in the Java class, you probably have created an emulator. I'm going to load it here, and then I'm going to show you how to load it in the Java emulators in a few minutes. And I just want to show you what it looks like before I attempt to load it in the emulators, because mine might not necessarily load, because this is running a bit on the slow side. So if you're interested in the VBox emulators, and if you're getting into Android application development, I highly recommend getting one of the x86 Android emulators. We went through this last weekend. If you're interested, show up for the Android stuff in a couple more weeks, and we'll run through the VBox editors. But we've already sort of done that already, so if you're interested, you can stay a little bit later, and I can set you up with VBox. So I'm not going to waste class time, though, with it right now. But if I load up my emulator, then I connect my emulator, and I'm going to connect it with a little text string that we created, script that runs it. I'm going to show you how to run it on the Android emulator in a few minutes. But if I run this project, run it as an Android application, it's going to load up in my emulator, theoretically. I have some errors. Yeah, I know, but it doesn't really matter. It loads with and without the errors. It always shows errors. So this is showing some serious errors, though. Let's see. Let's see what... Oh, no, here it is. It hasn't started running yet. I have this selected first. It'll show up with all these serious errors. Just because it's throwing exceptions, it doesn't necessarily mean I need to catch them or work with them. And I haven't. So now I see Firestone Hello World, which is my base, but if I click on it, and if you have this emulator, you've got this little button down here that's going to give me my options menu. If I click on here and click on menu, this is in the VirtualBox emulators. I have, these are the two menu items I created. One was called test and the other one was called preferences, and if I click on the items, it throws up a little toast message. It should throw up a little toast message. Maybe that's why. There it is. Menu number, item number 1 was selected. And then I click on it again, and it says nothing. I probably have an error message with item number 2 because it's not showing up. So hold your thought on that for a moment. I'm going to close this emulator so I can show you the ones that you have if you want to run it yourself, because some people don't have the VirtualBox set up. But I also want to point something else out to you as well, which is the reason why I'm doing this here. Look at all these messages. I got Java, IO exception, broken pipe. I got, it still ran, by the way, you saw it run. I got Sun, NIO, I don't even know what this is, file dispatcher write native method. socket dispatcher, line 29, UI, all these uncaught exceptions that I would not normally see. Do I care about all these uncaught exceptions? No. Would I care about them if I was troubleshooting this and trying to find problems, solutions to this? Probably. Am I going to decipher all this? No. Instead, I'm going to put up a log. So in the regular old Java world, it's nice to catch an exception and only throws one and it goes away. This just continues. It finds an exception, it'll just continue over and over again until it decides it's done with exception handling. Yeah?
Is it, can you import the tic-tac-toe app into Android or create an application using that?
We can. I'm going to show you that actually, if you remind me. I'm not going to do it right now, but I will show you the concept of tic-tac-toe on the Android. That's a good idea. I wasn't prepared to do it, but I don't have a built project for it, but I can still do it on the fly, and we can kind of sort of see how that works. In fact, we can probably do it next, actually. Let's do it next. But I wanted to show you a couple of other things with this. So our console... Oh, okay, so for those people who don't have VirtualBox and want to see this program run, it will run. Mine has a slight little problem with menu item 2. I think it's probably because, what does it say here? Toast created but not shown. Did you forget to call show? Oh yeah, probably. That's why it wasn't working, so I'm going to put here show.show. I probably erased it when I, so now I fixed it. I probably erased it when I was editing the cut and paste job. So now if I save it, it probably should show the next toast. What's wrong? We look the same. Well, one of them shows. This one should show. I'm not quite sure why it's giving me another message here. Add suppress show toast. The dot show should work. I'll add the suppress then. Explain issue toast show. Toasted created but not shown. Did you forget? I just added it. Okay, we'll just leave it alone. Okay. So for those people who don't have VirtualBox and want to run it on the Android emulators, you go to the window directory. You go down to Android Virtual Device Manager. Select that one. I'm going to create a new one here. This one is a 4.2 project, as you see in the left-hand corner over here. The emulators are backward compatible. So if you click on the new button, you can type in the name that you want to create it. See these names I've created over here have the version on it. So if I create here Android 2.3, I'll put 2.3 on here. If I click on the device, I can leave it blank actually. I believe I can leave it blank, otherwise I can pick a device. If I pick on the target, I'm going to pick this one for a 2.3.3 Android. Do not select the Google APIs. It's going to give us a different emulator. It's going to be for Google Maps and Google Voice and Google everything in terms of the APIs that were needed for that. This is going to give us a general Android emulator device. It looks like I do have to pick a hardware. I can just pick the first one on the top here, next to 7, which is going to give me a next to 7 looking device. The CPU I can leave on ARM, which is the top device. If you're not noticing anything in these menus, if this stuff is coming up blank for you, which it might for some people, in a few minutes I'll tell you why. But if you do have stuff in here, go ahead and click on OK. And you'll see the emulator in your list. Here's mine right here. If your list is empty, then close the device manager. Go back up to Window and go into the Android SDK manager. And you need to install the options so that you can populate those drop-down lists. And what you're installing are the SDKs and the emulators and the device support. So in here you notice I have everything in Uncle installed on this computer here, or most of the stuff installed, except for some of the newer stuff. It looks like I need to update the available version. If everybody does this simultaneously, it will probably take the Wi-Fi down. But if you don't have anything in the options at this point, you need to download something, I'd go ahead and do it. If you don't bother, and just select what you have in terms of the emulator. And you can, often at another time, you can update this, install. Looks like I have installed 8 packages I need to install. And you can also set an option to automatically update. I have this turned off, which is why mine's not updating. But you can install the emulators here by clicking on the emulator device and coming down here and clicking on the ARM support, Intel support, MIP support, all of the other items in the list here that are going to add. This is not installed, but it's not installed for 4.2. I do have it installed for 4.1, actually, which is why I need to update this, but I'm not going to update it right now. If I do that, I've got 2 options. I can run the emulator from here, and I click on the emulator that I'd like to run, and I press Start here, and then I can set the size of the screen, the memory that's being allocated to it, stuff like that. We did notice, and if you want to change parameters, click on Edit. We did notice that if you lowered the RAM, and it worked on my system, I loaded it to 512, the emulator actually works better. So I lowered the RAM now to 512. I haven't tried 256 on it, but one of the reasons why I don't use these emulators is because they're memory intensive. They take a lot of time to load. So now if I, let's say, want to run it, I've closed down my VirtualBox so it's no longer loaded. So I'm going to load it on the emulator that I just created. If I right mouse click on the project and do Run As, I can run a configuration for it, or I can run as an Android application and then select. So if I run as an Android application, it'll pick the most appropriate, which happened to be the emulator 64 ARM for Android 2, and it'll just pick one at random. Well, picked one, the first matching one to the configuration that I had for this project, which was a 4.2 project. If I don't want to do that and I want to specify which emulator I'm going to run, I can right mouse click, go down to Run As, and click Run Configuration. If I run the configuration, then I can tell it which emulator to run on. And I see in the background I have the Run Configuration window. And so I can click on the target, and I have my project in the left-hand window. If I click on Target, I can specify which emulator to run it on. And then once I select the emulator, I can apply the change. It's already running, so I'm going to leave it alone. I can apply the change, and then I can run it. But I'm going to close this because I don't want to run it twice. And while this is loading in the background, I'm going to play around with the project. This will take 5 to 10 minutes to load up, which is why I don't use it. If I had to wait, if it was that, every time I had to test something, if it took 5 to 10 minutes to load it up, I wouldn't be doing this type of development anymore. So in order to continue as an Android developer, I needed to install VirtualBox and the ISO. So if you're interested in that, hang out at the end of the class. We'll set you up if you haven't been set up yet. If you're in the Android class, we did it last weekend. So, while that's loading, I want to talk about Java because this is the Java class. And I want to talk about, so that's the end of this particular tutorial. We have a working program. So I want to play around with this program a little bit while this is loading and show you a few things that you can do now that you know Java. So if I click on mainActivity.java, out here in the onCreate menu, this is the stuff that we created for our GUI. So all we've done essentially is loaded the GUI. I can now make, I'm going to take a person, an employee, and that stuff, I'm going to stick it in this project. The regular old Java files. So I'm going to go ahead and actually I'll just make a new one here. I'm going to go ahead and click on here. I'm going to go back now to Java programming. I'm going to say, okay, now we just did all this Android stuff. If you're an Android developer, you have to know Java as well as Android. Otherwise you can't do anything. You can just do what we just did, play around with the GUI. But what if I want to make this like my HR program that I did the other day with person employee? Then I can come back up over here, go File, New. Let's just put a class in. We're going to add a class. I'm going to add a class to this project. You don't have to do this. I just want to demonstrate a point here. I'm going to call this one Person. Do I make it abstract? Sure, I'll make it abstract. I don't know, I won't make it abstract. I'll just leave it as person. We already know how to do all that stuff. And now in here I have person. So out here, this onCreate's equivalent to my main method. So I can go person P is equal to new person. And all that stuff we've done yesterday, I can repeat and do it today. Except for one minor little exception. Minor little exception is that I'm probably not going to write things to the console. Instead, did I misspell it? P-E-R-S-O-N. I'm not going to write it to the console. Instead, I'm going to write it to the GUI components. And if I'm going to write it to the GUI components, then I'm going to make things like a label. So what I can do, as an example, is go out to my layout, put a label out there, and then, let me just do that actually. So I'm going to click on the resource folder. I'm going to go out to my layout, click on my main activity. I'm going to drag a label over there. And the label that I'm going to drag over, actually I have a text view. I have a text field, I'll just leave it alone. Do I have an ID for the text field? No, I don't. Let me just put a label on here too then. Because well, text view is a label. So I can just add an ID. So here's my hello world, right? So I'll just stick it up there. Let me add an ID for the hello world. Hello. There we go. That's what I wanted. I'm going to call this Android layout. And I can actually just select it from here. It's going to be ID in here. H-I. Yes. Well, we'll see it in the next project. But anyway, I can add an ID. I just wanted to show you what I was going to do here. I can add an ID here. And then what I do end up doing here, once I've done that, is I'll go over, oops, back to person up here. And then I can create a new instance of a new object, like, you know, say, what's it, a text view, my text view, if I get the spelling correct. And it'll say, do you want to import it? I'll say, yeah, I want to import it. Okay, so now I have a text view. And then I can take this here, this r.layout, actually after I've exploded it, and say, well, it's going to be equal to, this text view is going to be equal to person.getName. Person.get something. So what I'm doing is I'm taking the same objects that I've created in a non-kind of Android kind of fashion, and I'm going to take those objects, and instead of writing them to the console using system out, I'm going to create text views and buttons and things, and then write the stuff to the button by imploding the output file to do it. So if I look at the concept, what I'm doing is essentially switching the UI over from a command line operation, and I'm switching it over to use this XML stuff that we looked at. All the coding is identical. All of the concepts are completely identical. So what we'll do then is, rather than working with this one, which doesn't really do anything, in the next tutorial we're going to see the options menu, we're going to overload, but we're going to inherit and implement an interface, and then we'll add to it, and as we start working more with it, the components of the GUI, because we're going to put some stuff out on the interface, then you'll kind of see it come together. By the time that one's over with, we can take and do the tic-tac-toe, I believe. Actually, you can probably do the tic-tac-toe yourself at this point. Because what you're going to do is take, do I still have tic-tac-toe in here is the question. It was in the swing one? Let's see. Actually, I can put tic-tac-toe in this program. How are we going to do that? We're going to do this. Actually, it'd be an interesting experiment here. Tic-tac-toe is the entire game. Let me refresh my memory on tic-tac-toe. Now, the entire game is in here, isn't it? And it's bringing up a swing. Is it using swing? Yes, it is using swing with buttons. So, if I were making this tic-tac-toe game, let me actually draw out what I think I would do, actually. So, I'm not going to build it. I'll let you build it because you can build it, actually. And in the next example, we're going to see how the GUI items are connected with the code. So, you'll see it definitely. But let me just build a tic-tac-toe. So, I would actually just take the GUI. Actually, here, I'll go back to this one we were working on because it really doesn't have anything on the interface. So, back to first one, back to the resource, back to layout. I have this actually for the Android people. I have a version of this, but it's not on this computer. So if you're in the Android class, you're going to see it coming up. But that's why I don't really want to spend time here to build it. But take the label off, right? And what was the tic-tac-toe? It was essentially, what, 6 buttons? 9 buttons, excuse me. So I got 1 button, 2 button, 3 button. Build a grid of buttons. So I got the buttons out here. Each one of these buttons is going to have an ID associated with it. I'll show you that actually in a few minutes. Fix the on-click event for each one of the buttons. So we get, this is my makeshift tic-tac-toe for right now. I could probably build a better interface out of this. But let's see. See where it says the button ID? We have ID button 1, button 2, button 3. Same thing as before. If we go back, oh, sorry I closed it. Let me go back to that tic-tac-toe game. So we got button 1, button 2, button 3, button 4. So we got all these buttons, but instead of it being drawn with the J button, we have it drawn here, button 1, button 2, button 3, button 4. And in the code, we take the same code. Copy it into the project. In main, we don't have main, we have onCreate. In onCreate, we have, in fact, if I get a chance, I'll build this and I'll stick it out there and I'll send you guys a list, but it's kind of tedious. In main, we do this new tic-tac-toe, and then we let this do the work. But instead of setting the text, we're going to set the text through the GUI. So we're going to use the XML r.java interface that we're going to see in the next tutorial that's going to show you how to actually set the label on the buttons to the X's and the O's. This is Java code. Works the same way, actually. In fact, this might be pretty easy for you to do, actually. So, without going off on too many more tangents, any questions about the concepts that we're working with so far in terms of how we're taking this knowledge of Java and translating it over? Oh, my editor loaded up, my emulator loaded up. So I have to unlock the emulator once it loads up and give it a few more minutes to see if this project is actually going to load. It may or may not load. Huh? It does look better, although is it worth the time and the energy? Plus, also the image that I have isn't really. Well, I have hello today from last time. Let's see what I got down here. See, it's not responsive. Can I run hello today? Well, it's also the recording stuff, so that's the wrong one. Today is the day. Yes. Oh, here we go. I believe it's actually trying to load. It's trying to load this project still. But because of the recording stuff that I have running right now, I don't believe it's going to load. Or if it does load, I can leave it up next few minutes. So. Not bad because we just came back from lunch. Not about time for a break, and then I can see at the end of the break to see if it's loaded. If not, just cancel it out completely before we move on to the next one. So. Yeah, alright, so not bad. I'm going to leave this up and running. Let's see if it loads. And what do we, let's take a bio break for, what, 5 minutes? Quick one? 5-10 minutes? Okay, then we'll start in with the next tutorial. And in the meantime, maybe if I get back from my bio break soon enough, I'll try and work with the tic-tac-toe to see what would happen. So, alright, 10-minute bio break.